This episode is brought to you by Shopify. Do you have a point of sale system you can trust, or is it a real POS? You need Shopify for retail. From accepting payments to managing inventory, Shopify POS has everything you need to sell in person. Go to shopify.com/system, all lowercase, to take your retail business to the next level today. That's shopify.com/system.
Hi there. Thank you so much for listening to Raising Me. This is where we take the challenges, big and small, that we're facing as parents, the ones we could really use some help on, right to the experts for advice. I'm Adrienne Stein, longtime journalist and a mom of three who is frankly trying to just figure this out too. Today we're talking about video games, and I'll tell you, this is a struggle in my house. How much you should allow kids to play, how to get them off without a battle, whether it's big or small, and when kids should be allowed to play what games, right? There's so many questions. So I recently came across a video that changed my perspective on this, and I wanted to share it with you. It came from Knibb, and it's actually part of a larger conversation that we had. She is a longtime child therapist specializing in trauma. She comes from the UK. She's got a TEDx talk. She's an author. She recently went viral for her social video called Modern Kids Are Not Okay. And she's a mom, so she understands where we're coming from. So we talked with her about that viral video. And if you haven't listened, you'll find that episode in the episode list. It's called Why Modern Kids Are Not Okay. But in this part of the conversation, I asked her about how to manage and navigate video games in a healthy way at home. It's inspired by this social video of hers, and I just go ahead and take a listen.
Are you a parent fighting with your child when it's time to stop gaming? Here's a useful tool. When a parent brings a child into my office, I ask the parent to come in, watch their child play some video games like Minecraft, Fortnite, or Fall Guys. I ask them, tell me what's happening in the game. 9 times out of 10, parent hasn't got a clue. This is a huge problem. If you don't understand the game your child is playing, it's going to be a lot harder for you to get them to stop. Here's one reason why. Online games like Fortnite, Call of Duty, League of Legends are played in matches with other people in a team. Each game varies in match length. In Fortnite, if you die, the match ends. But if your squad is still alive, then you might win the match. So it gets complicated. If you demand that your child turns off their game immediately, means they're leaving their friends or teammates behind, which could cause them to lose. They lose the progress they'd worked hard for in that match, which could have been over an hour in some cases. Even worse, some games even punish you for leaving in the middle of a match. Imagine if a football player just stopped playing mid-match. People would be furious. Your child's friends won't be happy with them either. This is partly why your child fights with you, and it's understandable. You need to agree on what I call a natural stopping point. If you were reading a really good book right in the middle of the chapter and someone demanded you stop, you'd be annoyed because it isn't a natural stopping point. I give training to parents to bring an end to the bedtime or dinner time battles around video games. Get in touch.
It's a way of thinking about video games that I just had never thought of before, and I'm so grateful for the opportunity to chat with her about it. Check it out. Video games is something that so many families struggle with. It's not just like, how do you know which games are appropriate? How long should they play? How do you get them off the device without, creating a stressful situation for everybody? In one of your videos, you do talk about the understanding about how games work and why that's so important. And I thought it was such a great take on, just this whole idea of the push-pull of video games with parents and children. So could you dive into that a little bit and explain why it's so important for us as parents to understand what games they're playing? Because most of the time I'm just like, yeah, something with a car and they're racing or there's the splatting paint everywhere. I don't know.
Okay. So again, I like to use metaphors because they're quite easy to understand. So because we all know who this person is, I can always use the example of David Beckham because he's the most famous person around the world. Okay. So David Beckham used to practice football every single day. He practiced in his house, he practiced in the yard, he practiced in the garden, he practiced at school, he practiced on the way home from school. It would actually be classified as a disorder if we took the length of time that he was playing football, because we would probably look at it and go, ooh, that looks like addiction, or that looks like an obsession. However, because it's football, he's perceived as doing what I've just called it, practice. Okay, so that's one of the things that I'm just going to set to one side. Now, because we've all got an idea of David Beckham, that pretty much means we've probably all seen him play football, or soccer as you call it in the US. And we all have this knowing, this understanding. We might not understand every single rule. And I am just going to confess, I am an ex-football coach as well with the kids. So this is why I use this metaphor. So not everybody understands the offside rule. But what we do understand is it's a game of two halves. There's a break in the middle. And after the break, the teams swap ends. Pretty much like lots of other games. We know how tennis works. We might know how some of the card games work. Because we've all grown up watching these games, playing these games ourselves. They've been part of our education system. So we have a good idea about what a football match is. And never, ever, ever has David Beckham's mum walked onto the middle of the field and dragged him off saying, that's enough, David. That's too much football for today. Or I said, get your backside in. Now, we have a...
Which would be a great visual, actually. That would be hilarious. But you're right. No, I'm following you completely.
So when we think of computer games, many people have, and quite often nowadays, children have headsets on. So you don't necessarily get the idea that children are in an arena. And that arena might be because they're playing a timed game or a tournament game. And to be perfectly honest, many of us adults have grown up with games like Space Invaders, Asteroids,
Tetris, Mario Brothers.
And on those games, we got used to the fact that you would either play them on your Super NES or your Sega system at home, and you would be on the television. I mean, I'm from the era of Pong and kind of the tabletop games. But certainly, if I played Space Invaders, you played till you lost all 3 lives. That was how the game went. And if you died on a platform game like Donkey Kong, you had to go back to the beginning. And there's this assumption about that's what computer games are. Only with Sonic, with some of the early games that started to come out, there was this idea of you could complete levels. And many parents get mixed up between a tournament game or a trophy game or something that's timed, and think they're very similar to a platform game where you're doing lives or levels. And that's not necessarily so. Understanding the different types of games really does help. Now, there's a lot of acronyms in this space, so I will keep it kind of simple. There are games that are like Zelda, where you are making progress and you are completing a storyline, and we call those role-playing games, and summarized down to RPG. You might be playing a bigger version of a game like that online, like World of Warcraft or RuneScape, and those are often called MMORPGs, so multimedia online role-playing games. Those games are easy enough to work out, because what you would have to say to a child is, okay, when do you get to the save point? When do you get to the point where you can save your progress and come off the game, knowing that when you go back on it, you start in exactly the same point? So when you start to look at games like Minecraft, there's different versions and ways that you can play the game. So there's a creative mode and then there's a survival mode. In the creative mode, you don't die and you just build whatever you want to build. And as long as you get to a save point, that allows you to turn the game off at that particular point. But if you're in survival, it's a tournament type game and you have to achieve certain outcomes and tasks.
This episode is brought to you by Shopify. Do you have a point of sale system you can trust, or is it a real POS? You need Shopify for retail. From accepting payments to managing inventory, Shopify POS has everything you need to sell in person. Go to shopify.com/system, all lowercase, to take your retail business to the next level today. That's shopify.com/system.
So even if we just take Minecraft, there's varying versions within the game. So I'm afraid on this occasion, this is one of those things where parents have to get their hands dirty, get in the mud with their child, and sit and watch the games to understand which kind of game and learn, as I always call it, learn the markers on the screen so that you know what kind of game they're in. So if for example, they're in survival mode, you get a row of hearts and you also get a row of chicken drumsticks that tells you about your health and whether you're hungry, etc., etc. Because in survival mode, obviously, you've got to survive. In creative mode, you don't see those at the bottom of the screen. So just by walking past the screen, I would be able to go, okay, they're in that mode. That now means if I want them to be at the dinner table, I have to consider what they're doing. And I might come in and spend 2 minutes, 3 minutes watching. Okay, I see what you're doing. Right, when you get to your next save point or when you've achieved the task, can you come off? Or would you explain to your friends that it's nearly dinner time, so you will be leaving soon? And cooperatively, the team comes to an agreement about what's happening. The video I did on Instagram and on TikTok is pretty much about those games like Fortnite, League of Legends, some of the bigger games. If you leave the game and you're in tournament mode and you're teamed up with your friends, which of course the parent might not hear because the headset's on, if you leave before the team has achieved its task, your team gets punished, you get punished, and sometimes the game will also punish you in terms of the next time you come back that your ranking has changed and things like that. So this is why children have their temper tantrums, because it's really important. And they will, if I think about the little handbook that I wrote in 2016 was I worked with a girl who had got scratch marks on her neck, and all because she was keeping hold of the device and the mum was trying to get it off her. And she was saying, I need to just finish this. And mum didn't understand and it got into a battle. So as I've said, my goodness, 2016 that's got to be 2015 that I was seeing the client, that's nearly a decade ago.
Yeah. And there are a couple of things that I take away from that too. For one, it's showing interest in what interests your child. And sure, maybe it is soccer or football, but it might be video games, and that is okay with healthy parameters around it. But so it's showing interest in what interests them. But it also seems like by doing that and understanding that, it would help with the transition into the next activity, whatever it might be, whether it's dinner or you got to leave to get it out the door for whatever event or whatnot. And that could help in those situations where you do see like tensions rising, they get angry. This is ridiculous, whatever it might be, whatever the attitude is.
Usually it's I hate you. You don't understand. It's because when children are upset, they go wholeheartedly.
But I think it's empathy, right? Like when it gets down to it, it's showing empathy for your child. This is important to your child. It may not make sense to you. It may not be a space that you really care much about or care to understand, but it is important to understand because it is important to your child. So I love that analogy of a player on the football field, AKA soccer field. Should we worry, or maybe it's how much should we worry about violence in the video game?
The topic of violence is really interesting because violence is the act, aggression is the emotion that goes alongside violence. Okay, so some people can be violent with very little aggression, and some people can be violent with a whole heap of aggression. So when you look at UFC, that's another good example. In UFC, there are a number of people who go into it with a tactic, and they're not necessarily being overtly violent, but they are being aggressive. And then you will find other people who are overtly violent with little aggression. So you get this mixture of, and you can usually tell when somebody has, I think the phrase is, lost it, and you can see them dysregulated and they're being incredibly aggressive. Now, violence in games comes with lots of different ways of rating and censoring and kind of giving us knowledge about the game. Now, what we have in this country is we have PEGI ratings, and I think you've got the ERSB in terms of whether it's mature. It's not competent enough to explain to parents what the violence is. So let's just take the first person shooters. These are Fortnite, Call of Duty, Counter-Strike, and the kinds of games that you can sort of play in Minecraft, because all of them have violence and all of them have an ability to show shooting activities within the games. Certainly you can do this in Roblox, you can do it in Minecraft, but what we are quite familiar with are, for example, Fortnite and Call of Duty. They tend to be the two that I compare. Right. In Call of Duty, the violence isn't any worse than it is in Fortnite. What you get is a different graphical representation of it. Now, if I was to explain, aggression is a healthy emotion, and violence is usually the way that we master our own aggression. And when we talk to children, we talk about you can be angry, but you can't hurt other people. But what we do tend to do, and this has been, it's not just our generation, this has happened for a long, long time. Don't be angry is a message that's often given to children. And we need to understand there's healthy expression of anger, and then there's being angry and hurting others. So the violence in the game is depicted by the level of blood, by the level of foul language, the kinds of images you see after somebody has died. And if you see any videos of Fortnite, when you shoot somebody, they go into a nice blue hue, like a ghost shape. And then there's like a machine that comes and kind of takes them away like an alien. So the violence that children are engaging in is usually an expression of pent-up energy during the day. It can be, I want to be a winner, therefore I'm going to squeeze the controller really hard. And I use these games in therapy. I use them with children because it's about managing their emotional distress, giving them what we call the window of tolerance and helping them understand, okay, well, we've just done something in the game which we know we can't really do in the real world. You certainly can't go around shooting people. It's just not okay. But some children will have what I call the short-term Rocky syndrome. I usually call it the Rocky syndrome, right? And this is based on, again, showing my age, in the 1980s, we had two films, The Karate Kid and Rocky. And when people watch those films, afterwards, there would be, and I've certainly engaged in this, you would jump around the living room and you're wah, 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 doing your karate moves.
Yeah.
And certainly when Rocky IV came out, people actually were getting into fights in the auditoriums in the cinemas because they were so excited, and it was the hero's journey story, and people got involved and they empathized. So what we have to watch out for with children is, yes, you have the short-term aggression, which this is what the research shows. After playing a violent game, yes, there is a short period of time where children might then display that kind of aggression. They may display copycat behaviours, but overall, violent games don't necessarily make violent children, and violent games don't necessarily make violent adults either.
Okay, so that was my conversation with Kath Knibb on video games. And I did go in with that new perspective and tried it out. After our chat, I sat down with my 11-year-old son. He was playing video games in the living room, and I just started asking him about his game. It's the one where they splatter paint everywhere. Have you seen that one? Anyway, it was cool because he did look at me funny a little bit at first, like, what? What is going on? What is going on? But then he just kind of got chatting about the game and how it all works. And it was so nice to just sit there and listen to him and hear about something that he really enjoys. It's been a happier and better balanced situation overall. Perfect? No. But just coming in with an understanding and from a place of working together, appreciating that this is some of his social time and that just shutting it off can put him in a bad position with the buddies that he is playing with. And just, again, finding that natural stopping point. It's good. It's really good. So anyway, if you haven't listened to our Why Modern Kids Are Not Okay episode with Kath, highly recommend that. You can check it out and find it in the playlist. Thank you so much for listening to Raising Me. I'm Adrienne Stein. This episode is edited by Megan Littlefield and produced with Nate Eldridge. Please follow Raising Me wherever you get your podcasts. Of course, consider a positive rating and review too, because that helps others to find this message, and we really appreciate it. Wherever you are, I hope you learned something new and get to take a little time for you.